Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, Russ Lover's Garage. A little bit of a shop talk. And everybody's a buzz. Kyle Busch signed with Richard Childress, and a lot of things going on there. With that signing, everybody was wondering what was going on, but everybody's all excited as well. If you haven't been under a rock over the last several weeks, you know that NASCAR, the Cup guys, some of them, are actually going to be returning back to North Wilkesboro next year for the All-Star race. Kind of came out of left field there, but never can tell really what's going on. But just wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about what is the future of NASCAR. My opinion, 50 cents probably wouldn't buy you a Coke at your local convenience store, but being a lifelong fan of it, of the racing, being brought up in dirt track NASCAR literally my entire life, got a few opinions, and I've got one question here at the end I'm going to ask, and I'd like to have some comments from you folks. I just don't really understand what I'm seeing, and I don't hear anybody really talking about it. But to look at the future, we really need to sit back and look at our past. A few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to spend some time, better part of an afternoon and evening, with three NASCAR legends. Jimmy Means, one of the most prominent independents in the late 70s and early 80s, out of Forest City, North Carolina. At the time, he campaigned a car and was very competitive, and also got to spend some time with Donnie Allison, the younger member or youngest member of the Alabama gang. If you'll remember, in 1979, him and Bobby and Cale there in Daytona put NASCAR on the map, so to speak. Go back and refer to all of the footage that's out there about the fight that they had down there in turn 3 and 4. Petty went on to win the race, by the way. That also was the first Daytona 500, if I'm not mistaken, for Dale Sr. But that being said, got to spend some time with those two gentlemen. I would recommend and want to draw your attention. This book right here that Donnie wrote, I got from Donnie. Got him to sign it for me and read it, and it's Donnie Allison, as I recall. And you'll get some insight into some stuff that happened back in the day, how he got his start, what he went through to be a driver, and work on the cars there, and how the Alabama gang actually came together, he, his brother, and Red Farmer, and then later on Neil Bonnet. Those guys obviously are cornerstones of our sport. Another very interesting fella that I got to spend some time with, got some insight, kind of knew a little bit about him, but I didn't really know how he fit in to the early NASCAR scene as it relates to Dale Sr. getting his start. And that's Mr. Will Cronkite. Draw your attention to his book, I Was a NASCAR Redneck. This book right here, you can tell she's pretty involved, gives you insight into what he and many others went through. He and Donnie worked together in Alabama. Will has got an impressive resume, but through connections, and you know how relationships work in NASCAR if you followed it very long, with the help of Humpy Wheeler and a few other people, Will was able to get involved with and get hooked up with Dale Sr. early in his career. If you watch the movie about Dale that was put out after his passing, they mention Cronkite and they show the car. It's very factual, that segment of the movie. Not that the whole movie's not right, but that really hit a nerve after seeing that movie many times, and recently finishing this book. It kind of drew some closure to the entire circle there. Again, looking back at our past and where NASCAR came from, these books are a must-read for a NASCAR fan. And we'll drop some pictures in there where the time that I spent with these folks and got to know them, got to talk with them off camera about some things, and very interesting, very interesting. These guys are a wealth of knowledge and extremely sharp. I think Will now is close to, if not 80 years old. Donnie's probably not far behind him. But let's take a look with the way the progression of the cars themselves have made, and that's going to lead into my question at the end of the film here, or end of the taping. Got some notes down here in front, so I'll be referring to those off camera from time to time. But if you look at the 70s and 80s, when the NASCAR cars, you could look out there and see that it was a Dodge, a Plymouth, a Ford, a Chevrolet, an Oldsmobile, a Buick. You knew what was going on. The bodies weren't all shaped up and then stickered such as they are now. But those cars had a 3-year life. In other words, you could run them for 3 years. If you got a brand new car in 80, you could run that thing through the 83 season, and it had to be updated. A lot of different reasons for that, body changes and safety and things like that. But what happened with those cars, many of you may not know, those things got passed down. Same bolt pattern, same wheels, a lot of the same suspension. A lot of the aerodynamics were the same, although they would change motors and various other setups and things like that. To get a feel of that genealogy, I would also refer you to Bill Ryan at Bill Ryan Enterprises. He's got some videos on here that folks have introduced him to the YouTube world. And he explains, you know, this car started out here, and he's got a great collection, by the way, a great private collection of old cars. But he goes in his videos and he'll tell you this car started out here, and you can see that, you know, 5 or 6 steps down the line, it wound up, you know, on down in the late model many years after it was new, and it was outside that 3-year window for NASCAR. But again, it went down through Cup, Busch, Sportsman, late model, that type of thing. Then we get into the 90s and 2000s. Okay, Dale Sr., Jeff Gordon, you know, obviously up front. Still had Rusty Wallace still around, Ricky Rudd, those guys. But what you had was a massive, massive influx of corporate money, okay? You had people fighting literally at the corporate level to get their name on an Earnhardt car, get their name on a Darrell Waltrip car, anything that Penske and Roush and Yates and those guys had. The corporate money was just out there. I began at that time to kind of question some of the things that I was seeing, because up until that time, the only real prevalent multi-car team you saw was Junior Johnson with the 11 and 12 when Darrell and Neil drove for him. Later on, Yates kind of come along, then Gibbs, but you just didn't see, you know, the massive influx of money up until the 90s and 2000s, and then you started having the 3 and 4 car teams, and it got to be such a challenge for NASCAR. If you remember now, and it's still in place, you'll only have four cars operating out of one ownership. And now you see where Jimmy Johnson was. If you go back and look, he was kind of car sponsored, owned by Jeff Gordon, and now you've got Keselowski doing that. Now you've got Michael Jordan teaming up with Denny Hamlin. That's an offshoot. A lot of those guys are still involved. It's great, keeps the sport going. But again, those rules were put in place, and that was changes because the corporate money was there, and these guys could step up and do so much. Behind the scenes, if you look at what took place, you've got full-blown engineering groups assigned to each car. Okay, that's a massive amount of money. I mean, just the salaries alone, and then the changes. Okay, now comes the COT, the car of tomorrow. That's the one that had the splitter on the front and the big wing on the back. I really began to not like what I saw with NASCAR. I watched it still as a fan. I just didn't like that car, and NASCAR was going through some things. We had to make some changes with the wreck with Dale Sr. and the safety aspect of it. I get all that, but again, all of that corporate money. NASCAR began to migrate more and more west into new markets. Okay, we got Chicagoland, we picked up Kentucky, we picked up a race in Texas. You know, I'm a purist. I'm an old school hot rodder. My thought was NASCAR is a regional sport that reaches the world. I don't think these markets will sustain NASCAR, although there's a tremendous amount of money to be made right now. I don't think it's a long-term plan. And then you started seeing Darlington lose races. We lost all at Rockingham. We lost all at North Wilkesboro. Those tracks were the tracks that I grew up going to. In fact, this truck sitting behind me right here, I have ridden shotgun in this thing up and down the East Coast to every racetrack basically, other than Pocono and Dover. Daytona, every other track that you can name around. I've seen races with this truck parked in the parking lot. So as we started to go west in some of my favorite tracks, we were losing races. That really began to bother me. My dad basically just kind of checked out in the mid 2000s and just really didn't keep up with it anymore. Granted, he was getting up in age and all, but it wasn't a time that I was comfortable with, and really wanted to see NASCAR return to its roots, to the people that built it. And I felt like with the growth, especially around in the Charlotte and Atlanta market, the Daytona area, the Tampa Bay, St. Pete area down in Florida, and all of these cities that were on this side of the Mississippi, I knew that the market was there to keep these tracks going. We lost the market. We lost the interest out there. Now, last year NASCAR put the races, put the All-Star race there in the Coliseum. Again, they made money. It was a sellout. You introduced NASCAR to a new crowd. But my opinion, in my opinion only, that crowd's not going to support NASCAR once the new wears off. We saw that. We saw that in a big way at these other tracks. But now, the corporate money, if you look at the way things have went out, the corporate money now is beginning to kind of back away. The latest example of that would be M&M's. Mars Wrigley pulling out of the 18 car. That's a big time corporate sponsor. We saw a big change, obviously, when Winston pulled out and all of the politics involved there. Won't get into that. But we went through several, Monster and all of these other folks were involved. And now we've got Nextel with the Nextel Cup. But the corporate money has begun to kind of back out now, and it takes multiple sponsors to get a front row team through the season. You don't have the STPs sticking around. You don't have the DuPonts. With Petty and obviously Gordon. You don't really see that much anymore. Lowe's stayed with Jimmy Johnson basically throughout his entire career. So the corporate money now is kind of backing away, and what I think is going to wind up happening, and again, I don't know, but a lot of the engineering and stuff that's went into these cars and the money that's been spent to get us where we are, I'm really concerned whether we're going to be able to maintain that. I hope we can. Obviously, Penske, Hendricks, those guys are a lot smarter than I'll ever be when it comes to racing. Obviously, look at what they got versus what I got. Not hard to figure that one out. But I just look at it from a third person's perspective and understanding owning my own business and selling it, what it took to maintain a business. And at that level, you're talking millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. Okay. The return to NASCAR, the return to its roots, obviously, Darlington is really much on the radar screen now. The North Wilkesboro situation, would not be surprised at all to see trucks running up there on a regular basis. If you can get truck people in and out of there, the Xfinity wouldn't be far behind. They've got some logistics and some infrastructure up there that they've got to work on. Roads haven't changed any since 95, 96 when the last race was up there. So the track hasn't grown either. So we can get those crowds in and out. And I know Marcus and those guys are working with county and state officials to get those roads where they need to be. So that level of excitement for me is just off the scale right now. Also, let's not forget about Rockingham. There's been some money spent down there. I really look for those guys, and they've built that one. They're ahead of North Wilkesboro, but I look for that facility, although it's in private ownership. It's not in SMI. I look for those guys to start getting maybe late models, trucks, that type of thing, because that track's in shape enough to do it. Just don't know exactly what's going on there. Let's look at the new car. Okay, I'm going to lead in now to the one question that I've got and concern that I've got, and I haven't heard many people talk about it. The new car, it can take a hit. If you watch the races, it can take a hit. The drivers are taking a beating, it seems like. The hits seem to be a bit harder for the drivers in this car for whatever reason. I'm sure that the NASCAR folks are looking at that. That hit, you don't have with these carbon fiber bodies, you don't have the destruction to the metal and the quarter panels and that type of thing. So those cars are able to go on. I'm seeing a lot of suspension breakage in those hits, and they're able to fix it real fast. It's kind of like the road course type guys. They can tear a car up. It seems like just a few minutes they can put parts on it and get it back going. May not be necessarily competitive, but they've got it back on the track to pick up what points they can. To that end, you see the low profile tires, you got the single lug nuts. Okay, there's a big penalty if you have a wheel come off and all like that, because they're trying to get these guys to get it figured out. And I think Joey Logano in an interview that I saw the other day made a very, very good point in that this car is underdeveloped. Okay, if you're in the business of NASCAR, the only way you can develop a car is in competition. The only way you can get in competition is put in a race. Okay, so I'm not faulting NASCAR for the fact that they put something out there that doesn't work. They've got a lot of things to work through. But my main concern, and the question at the top of this video, is how is this car going to matriculate within the NASCAR ranks? And what do I mean by that is, if you go back and look, and earlier in this video I was talking about how those cars would be passed down. Okay, something's going to happen with Xfinity, and something's going to happen with truck. Okay, these cars do not equate in either one of those directions. Okay, those chassis do not equate. They're radically different. So I'm really concerned about what we're going to see with Xfinity and truck. I love the trucks, you know, big time truck guy. Got several of them sitting around, several of them I drive. Really concerned with those divisions and what's going to wind up happening, because I've been to races lately and their attendance is awful. If their races are not tied into one of the big NASCAR races, you can look at the stands and say, TV money's one thing, but at some point this chicken's going to come home to roost. And the fact that you don't have that meshing, that dovetailing of parts and stuff coming from the upper divisions down to these lesser teams. And let's face it, guys, folks like Kyle Busch and a lot of these other teams, Stackhouse Racing, even Dale Jr.'s outfit. Take a break there. Okay, let's face it, folks. Let's Dale Jr., well financed. Okay, Stackhouse, all of those guys, Kaufman, all of those guys are very well financed. Maybe not to the point to pony up that $20 million to get that charter with NASCAR, but they're very well financed. They're not financed enough to continually not have access to upper level stuff. I don't think those guys are going to have much of a problem, but what I am concerned about is the lower levels where the stuff goes through, let's say, to a sportsman division. Okay, the lesser Xfinity guys that's not running 2 or 3 cars, it's only running 1 car. You've got a decent shop, you're doing okay, you're making money at what you do, but again, at some point, if those parts aren't there, you got to start buying new stuff. And I know a lot of the late model guys, are using used stuff right now. I'm just concerned. There is no comparison from Cup down to Xfinity. You know, something's got to give in there, and I'm really concerned about how they're going to branch it off and maintain those guys respectively in their championships. Because let's face it, that's a grooming ground for your future drivers. So I don't think they'll go away. I think that there's some big decisions that's got to be made, and I think some of the smaller players may get squeezed either completely out of racing or at least down to even a further lower level, maybe than they will be comfortable at. Again, guys, just ran through this rambling. This is Shop Talk. It's Tuesday afternoon. Thank goodness that the weather has begun to break here in Piedmont of North Carolina. Not quite as hot and humid, but follow along. If you see something here you like, hit the like and subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. We're trying to build this channel, and I can't do it without your support. This coming week, this past weekend, Shades of the Past, you'll see a lot of the guys out there posting videos. The Rod Runs and Pigeon Forge will be there Thursday morning. Probably won't do anything live, but there'll be some recordings out there. So follow us along up there. Bring out some of my favorites. I got some friends that are going to meet us up there, and we're going to have a good time. Again, I do appreciate you watching, stopping by Russ Lover's Garage. Not too much longer, we're going to pull a couple projects in here and get started on making some sparks and smoke. Again, thanks again for watching.